Before I begin, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss any of my personal stories. And please tell me where you're watching from. I love knowing which towns and cities join me each night. Now, let me take you back to the conversation I never expected, but still think about to this day. It was late afternoon when the house finally fell silent. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort you. The kind that reminds you how much has changed. My divorce had been finalized for almost a year, but some days it still felt new. Some days it still felt like I was walking through the leftover pieces of a life that didn't fit anymore. That day, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a half-finished cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The sun drifted across the window, painting warm golden patches on the floor. But even the light felt far away. That's when I heard a soft knock on the back door. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, I debated ignoring it, but something inside made me get up and open it anyway. Standing there was Michael, my stepson, older now, more sure of himself, carrying a quiet steadiness that didn't exist in him years ago. "Amanda," he said gently, "you've been on my mind all week. Can I come in?" I hesitated, not because I didn't want him there, but because I wasn't sure I was ready to let anyone see how fragile I felt. But I opened the door wider anyway. He stepped inside and took a slow look around the kitchen, noticing the clutter I hadn't bothered to straighten and the untouched dinner in the sink. "A rough day?" he asked. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "A rough month," I admitted. He nodded, not pushing, not prying, just listening. "You want to sit?" he asked softly. We sat across from each other, and for a long moment, neither of us said a word. But somehow, the silence felt different with him there. Not empty, not heavy, just safe. He finally broke it. "Amanda, you don't have to pretend with me. You were there for me when I needed someone the most. Let me be here for you." My eyes stung instantly. It's strange how you can hold your emotions together all day, but the moment someone speaks to your heart with honesty, everything cracks open. "I don't feel like myself anymore," I whispered before I could stop myself. Michael leaned forward, his voice warm, sincere, steady. "That happens," he said. "Life knocks you around. Love shifts, people leave, and it changes the shape of everything. But you're still you, and you've always been stronger than you give yourself credit for." Hearing it from him, the boy I once helped raise, the young man who used to come to me for advice, now speaking to me with such clarity, it did something to me. I looked at him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you come today?" He smiled, small, soft, and full of meaning. "Because I felt like you needed someone to see you, and because talking to you has always made things feel right." My breath caught in my throat. That moment, that single sentence, brought a warmth into the room that had been missing for a long time. And what he told me next is something I still think about on the hardest nights. Michael's words settled into the room like warm air after a long winter. He wasn't rushing me. He wasn't talking just to fill silence. He was simply there, steady, grounded, exactly the presence I didn't know I needed. He rested his hands on the table, fingers interlaced, and looked at me with a calm that felt unusually mature for someone his age. "Amanda," he said gently, "I know things haven't been easy, but you don't have to keep everything to yourself." I swallowed hard. "I'm trying," I whispered. "It just feels like everything changed so fast, and I didn't." He nodded slowly. "That's okay. You don't have to change overnight. Growth doesn't work that way. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's slow, and sometimes it happens when you least expect it. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear something gentle, something that didn't ask anything of me. Michael leaned back slightly, his gaze warm. "You know," he said with a small smile, "when I was younger, even before Dad married you, I always thought you were the calmest person I'd ever met." I blinked. "Calm? Me?" He laughed softly. "Yeah, you weren't loud. You weren't dramatic. You just had this way of making people feel heard, even when I was being a stubborn little idiot." A breathy laugh escaped me despite myself. "You were never an idiot." "Maybe not," he said, "but I wasn't easy either, and you never made me feel like a burden." His tone grew quieter. "You were the one person who always saw me, really saw me." The words hit deeper than I expected. Unexpected, unfiltered honesty. "I didn't know you felt that way," I admitted. He shrugged lightly. "Life gets busy, people drift, but I meant to tell you. I just never found the right moment." He paused, then added, "Maybe today was the moment." The room grew still again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was full. Full of the kind of understanding that comes only when two people finally say the things they'd been holding for too long. Michael shifted his chair a little closer. Not intrusive, not forward. Just enough to show he wasn't going anywhere. "Amanda," he said, "can I be honest with you about something?" I nodded. "Ever since the divorce, I've worried about you. Not because I think you're weak, but because I know how much you gave to Dad, and how much of yourself you poured into that relationship." My chest tightened. "And I guess I kept hoping," he continued softly, "that one day you'd let someone be there for you again." Emotion gathered behind my eyes. Not painful, not overwhelming, just warm. "Michael," I whispered, "you didn't have to come check on me." He shook his head. "Yes, I did." "Why?" He held my gaze, his voice deepening with sincerity. "Because you mattered long before you became my stepmom, and you still matter now." For a moment, I didn't speak. I couldn't. Something gentle and comforting washed through me. The kind of feeling that makes you realize someone else sees your worth, even when you've forgotten it yourself. "And," he added with a softer tone, "I didn't want you sitting in this house thinking you were alone in the world. You're not. Not as long as I'm around." My breath wavered. His presence, his calmness, his quiet honesty. It comforted me in a way nothing else had for a long time. And that conversation, that deeply sincere, unexpected moment of truth, is something I still carry with me. Michael stayed seated across from me, elbows resting lightly on the table, eyes steady with a kind of mature patience that didn't belong to the boy I once knew, but to the man he'd quietly become. I hadn't realized I'd been staring at the floor until he spoke again. "Amanda, can I ask something?" His voice was soft, almost careful. I lifted my gaze. "Of course." "Do you ever talk to anyone about how you feel?" he asked. The question hit harder than I expected. I hesitated before answering, choosing my words slowly. "No, not really." I gave a weak laugh. "I'm not sure I even remember how to anymore." Michael nodded with a small understanding smile. Not judging, not surprised, just gently acknowledging. "I figured," he said. "You always put on a brave face. You always did, even when you didn't have to." There was something bittersweet in that truth. "I guess I didn't want anyone to worry," I whispered. He leaned forward slightly. "But I do worry," he said quietly. "I've always worried about you, even during the years we didn't talk much." That admission made something inside me soften, something I'd kept locked away for far too long. Michael, why? I asked softly. He didn't hesitate. Because you were the only person in that house who made me feel like I mattered. You listened to me when no one else did. You understood me. And you never once made me feel like a problem. My throat tightened again. I didn't think you noticed any of that. I noticed everything, he said gently. For a moment, neither of us spoke, but it wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense. It was healing. He continued, voice almost a murmur. You're one of the few people who ever made me feel safe, and I want you to feel that too. Safe. It was such a simple word, but it carried weight, warmth, memory, the kind of memory that makes you realize how quietly someone can impact your life and how deeply those moments can stay. I took a breath, steadier this time. Thank you, Michael. That means more than you know. He smiled softly, just enough for his eyes to show it. I didn't come here to fix anything, he said. I came because I wanted you to know that you're not facing life alone. Not as long as I'm here. And there it was, the moment that still comforts me. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was some grand emotional confession, but because it was real, honest, human, gentle, the kind of moment that reminds you you're still seen, still valued, still connected. Michael looked at me in the quiet that followed and added, You've spent your whole life being strong for other people. Let someone be strong for you now. That sentence, I don't think I'll ever forget it. It was the first time in a long time someone had spoken to me with that kind of truth. Soft, caring, meaningful. And to this day, that conversation still echoes inside me when the nights feel heavy. Michael leaned back in his chair, giving me a moment to breathe. A moment to absorb everything he had just said. The kitchen felt warmer somehow. Not because of the light, but because of the presence across from me. I wiped a quiet tear from under my eye and laughed softly at myself. I didn't realize how much I needed this, I admitted. Just talking, just being heard. Michael nodded, a gentle understanding in his eyes. Most people don't, he said softly. We go months, sometimes years, holding everything inside. But the moment you let it out, even a little, you feel lighter. He wasn't wrong. For the first time in a long while, the weight on my chest didn't feel quite so heavy. He stood up slowly, pushing his chair back with that easy, familiar confidence. I'm glad I came today, he said. I don't want you thinking I'm too busy for you. I'm not. I stood as well, though my legs felt oddly softer, steadier, calmer. You know, I told him gently, you grew up into someone very special. He chuckled softly. I had a good influence, he said. That line warmed something deep inside me. He wasn't just talking about childhood. He wasn't being polite. He was telling me, in the most understated way, that my presence in his life had mattered. Still mattered. He walked toward the back door, then paused, turning toward me with a sincerity that softened his entire expression. Amanda, if you ever have another night like tonight, one of those heavy ones, call me. Don't sit in it alone. You don't deserve that. The words landed in a place I didn't know was still tender. I nodded slowly. I will, I whispered. He smiled, small, warm, real. Good. And then he wrapped his arms around me in a gentle embrace. Not rushed, not obligatory, but steady and reassuring. The kind of hug that says I'm here, even when life feels unsteady. When he pulled back, he squeezed my shoulder lightly. You're stronger than you think, he said. but it's okay if you need someone. Even the strongest people do. And then he stepped outside, closing the door softly behind him. After he left, the house didn't feel so empty. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt calm, peaceful, almost comforting. I sat back at the table, replaying every word, every moment, every small truth he'd shared with me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't overwhelming. It was simply healing. A conversation that reached a part of me I'd forgotten about. A reminder that I'm still seen, still valued, still connected. And to this day, when the nights feel too long or the world feels too quiet, I go back to that afternoon, to the warmth in his voice, to the sincerity in his eyes, to the quiet strength he offered without asking for anything in return. That conversation still comforts me. Not because everything changed after it, but because I did. Just enough to keep going. Just enough to feel whole again. Just enough to remember that I'm not alone. And sometimes, that's all a person really needs.